Welcome to Happy Writing, your podcast home for taking positive steps forward with your author business. I'm your host and happy writer-in-chief, Dion Abulela. For joining us today, you can get the first 3 months of membership to the Happy Writing Author Lounge for only $5 a month. Simply use the code HAPPYPODCAST and join us over in the Author Lounge. Today's podcast episode is sponsored by Dorianne Dupre, author of the award-winning novel Scout's Honor. Scout's Honor shows you how far one person will go to save their honor and who really has a hold of it in the first place. You can find Scout's Honor at your favorite booksellers such as Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, and more. Hello, happy writers. We are so excited for you to join us today. We are live with the wonderful Everett De Morier. Everett is the author of the Crib Notes series, including Crib Notes for Your First Year of Marriage, a survival guide for newlyweds, and Crib Notes for Fatherhood, a survival guide for new fathers. However, those are not his most popular works. In 2015, Mr. De Morier actually published a title called 33 Cecils. Now, 33 Cecils is on an amazing journey. It's won the Top Fiction Prize at the 2015 London Book Festival, and it's currently being developed as a feature film with a 2019 release date. So, Mr. Morier, I know that this barely scratches the surface of your extensive author resume, but we are so excited to have you on today and talk about your writing journey.
Yeah, I'm still in shock from you calling me wonderful.
Oh.
So I have to recover from that. And then we can, wow, she called me wonderful.
Oh, well. Go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about your writing journey.
Sure. Everett De Morier, I've been writing for about 20 years. Started... Well, gosh, when my kids, actually, the first thing I got paid to write, there was a tabloid called the Weekly World News, and I sold them an article. I took my first son's ultrasound and turned it into a silly article about my wife is having the reincarnation of Elvis. And that was I became a professional. I got $50 in a t-shirt and, that started it all from there, and then just started doing articles and then books and then plays, and got to write the screenplay for the new film, and still having fun.
Now, what led you to think that your wife was having Elvis's reincarnation?
When you look at those, what's funny, when you look at those ultrasounds back then, they were done in black and white, mm-hmm. And as the babies formed, the head looked like a pompadour.
Yeah.
So we looked and we go, hey, it's Elvis. Our first child will be Elvis. So that was real easy to write. And the great thing about the Weekly World News is you don't have to do any verification. There's no fact check. And sure, you're having Elvis's baby. Here's your check.
So if any authors listening want to get started with freelancing, check out the World News.
Weekly World News. There is no background check or research involved. Yes.
That's great. I'm going to see what I can sling in a little bit here. You never know. You have so many great pieces to your resume. What would you say has been the most exciting part of your author journey so far?
About 8 years ago, I was asked to start being involved with a local group that did, we did plays that we created for the community. And I think that was a real trip, because writing is so slow, especially when you do a book. You sign a contract, you write a book, it takes a year, and then a year later it's out. When you have tight deadlines on plays, there's so many different things going on. You've got to write the thing in a matter of months. You've got to cast it. But the great part is you create these characters in your head. Then you cast them, then you sit over months and watch them become these people, and then your idea of those characters are gone, and they're now those people. But the hard part is you make up this lie, you hire people to play the parts of this lie, you create settings for this lie, then you bring in a few thousand people to watch this lie, and then after your 6 shows, the lie's over, and just when you're being convinced it's real, then you're going, oh, wow, this is a lie, and it's over like that. So the downside is it's very emotional when you do like a cradle to grave play.
Oh,
You
yeah.
get very involved with the people, and it doesn't fade out. It just stops. It's like a mini death. And I think that, but that is probably the most rewarding.
And I think some authors might really need to pay attention to a few things you just said there, because having a work put into either a screenplay or a movie or a play is a huge dream for so many authors, but they also don't understand that there's a little bit of control that they will have to give up during that process as far as the casting. And once it's done, the characters almost no longer solely remain to the book, but they also now remain property of that further adaptation. So that takes away a little bit of control, I guess, in a way. Was that hard for you?
Yeah, on the film side, you know, the one I really wanted to write the screenplay, which was so hard, which was a lot harder than I thought it was. I mean, I wrote the novel, and I'd written 8 plays at the time. I thought the screenplay part was going to be easy, but it was there's a lot involved in that. But you have to make those conscious decisions. You have to say this is a film and it's not a book. So there are things that from the book that will not translate, and you have to let them go. But then there are things in the film that you couldn't do in the book that you get to build up. So you can't be married to every word. And what's funny is in my short relationship with the film industry, you can tell that they're very reluctant with writers. They're so used to writers going, well, he was wearing a blue shirt. How come he's not in a blue shirt right here? And you could tell okay, we'll take care of it. You just sit down. But you've got to give all that away. You know, you got to say, this is the story. This is the important part. What shirt he's wearing or what he says or what this is unimportant if it gets us to here.
And even now, in the day of social media, it's not just the original author or writer, but I follow a lot of young adult authors on Twitter, and Becky Albertelli just had Simon and the Homo sapiens agenda made into the movie Love, Simon. And then
Mm.
Angie Thomas, I think that's her last name. I know I'm going to get crucified for drawing a blank, but the author of The Hate You Give, her book is being made into a movie. And on social media, there was a huge outcry over the casting and small details, to where both authors then had to say, listen, I don't control every part. Stop coming for me.
Yeah.
So I imagine now it's even more stressful on other producers to have the rabid fangirl, fanboy audience plus the intense authors. Your portfolio is very diversified, which I feel is something authors should strive for, as far as you having some musical scripts, writing articles, various magazine articles. But I want to hear from you why you strive to diversify your writing portfolio and not just focus on books or screenplays, and what this diversification means for the business side of your writing.
Yeah, I'd like to tell you what a writing genius that I am and how I planned all this out and carefully manipulated the path. But what's funny about what you just said is I wrote nonfiction because I was told from all the writing magazines and the writing groups that you need to get published to get your fiction published. So I wrote that, and what happened with writing 2 commercially successful fiction books is I learned the art of writing nonfiction, which is funny because when the novel came out, it was called by Amazon the book you have to Google to see if it's real. So it's written as if it really happened, and it actually works so well that the publisher still gets calls from people saying, "I remember when this happened in 1990." No, it didn't happen. But
Oh,
what's
wow.
funny about it is because I cut my teeth on nonfiction, I got to write some very unique fiction, and then because I got to do plays, I got to do some very interesting screenplays. So I think I think the rules, it's very interesting, and I think it helps to understand the rules and limits of each type. And for example, I thought screenplay writing would be so freeing, but the format is incredibly limiting. Um, in the fact that you have people that are smarter than you that are looking, going, okay, that half a page that you just did is an extra $80,000. we need to do it this way. And that's something that you need to pick up. That's decades of experience that you're not going to have.
Oh, wow. I had never even thought about that, where small details might add up during that transfer. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and you have people that like Brian Esquivel and Robinson McGiffin who helped me. I wrote it, and they were the ship's captains. They picked up on that stuff, and if this goes into a scene, a live, that's another this. And what's interesting about the format is anyone that's interested in screenplay writing, there's a software called Final Draft, which is the basis of the industry. And it's very intuitive. I mean, every like one page of a script is 1 minute of screen time. So it's designed to hold your hand through the entire thing. But by doing that, you need to obey those rules of that software.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'm saying interesting way too often. I need to find a different adjective. But I wondered, I did a little bit of research on screenwriting, and it said the average screen, the writing for it is between 80 to 90 pages. And I guess that would make sense.
Yep, 80 to 90 minutes. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Because I thought, oh, that's very short. Surely that's not an entire movie, but now that makes sense.
Yeah, and you can see as you're playing around with it, when you write the dialogue part, you can see it try to extend it, and then when you're writing screen directions and that sort of thing, well, that's not going to take any time, so that doesn't, that stays there, and it moves it up a little bit. So yeah, it's designed so one page is 1 minute.
Interesting. And I was trying really hard not to laugh when you were talking about the 33 Cecils being the book you have to Google to see if it's real or not, because I did that. So I was looking at it, reading the description and everything, going, this sounds so real. So how was it working with alternative history, and how did you weave the fiction into nonfiction, and what were your challenges?
Yeah, I think it helps that I'm a continuity freak. I mean, really, my family hates watching films with me, and they just hate it because if you've got a backpack on, and you are heading out to see the world in scene 1, and scene 4 you found the girl and you're in a tuxedo. Wait a minute, where did the tuxedo and the shoes get in that backpack? That stuff makes me crazy. So, but if it stops the viewer or the reader and makes them go, wait a minute, then you need to fix it, because it's gonna stop that journey. So it helps that I'm very intuitive in that stuff, and there were a few things in the book that is from a continuity side, I needed to either solve or expose, and I decided to expose. And by exposing them, I made them part of the plot. Instead of going, oh, I need to, how could he have done this, this, and this? I had the characters question, wait a minute, how could you do this, this, and this? And that actually spun it off in the direction it ended up in.
Oh, that's very intriguing for that process, because I haven't seen that a lot in alternative history that I've read. So that's kind of a different way to tackle it head on.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with the idea for 33 Cecils?
Again, I would love to tell you, that it just came to me in a dream. I was walking my dog, and I looked into a tree, and suddenly the image of my uncle spoke to. The real thing is, any writing that I do, and I can't speak for anybody else, you can't see past that page.
Yeah.
So, the gentleman Dave Aubrey that I work with on the plays, I would write, when we would start writing plays, I'd write one scene. And we talk about that scene. He'd say, that's good. Okay. And then he'd say, what's going to happen? I go, I don't know. I have no idea. You create these characters, you create these scenes, and then you hang things from the scene. And I think that's with 33 Cecils, that was exactly what happened. You create this scene, and then you hang the next scene on that, and you hang the next scene on that. And when something happens, there's a very little that was planned. The only thing was planned was going back, going, hey, I need to make sure, I need to fix this continuity thing, or I need to make sure that this connects to this, or hey, now that that's there, this could link to this. But I didn't know what was going to happen until it ended.
I think that's great for a lot of authors that are listening to hear, because I feel like a lot of new authors get so hung up on the fact that they have to know everything that's going to happen and they can't hang a scene off of a previous scene. So they'll stare at their work or the page that they've just finished or an outline perhaps. And I've heard from a lot of new authors that they feel like a failure if they can't see beyond what they're currently writing. And they're also afraid to just let the story tell itself or form organically.
Hmm.
Is that how big of a planner versus a pantser are you? And what advice would you have for authors who might
Yeah.
be struggling with this?
I personally can't do it. I can't plan. I know writers that do. There are authors that do complete outlines.
Mhm.
If I did a complete outline, that would just suck all the joy right out of it.
I end up
Um,
throwing mine away.
yeah,
So,
yeah. For me, I couldn't do it. But there are many authors that are very successful at it.
mhm.
Because I want to be sitting there and go, I wonder what this is going to. I wonder what he means by that. I wonder what this, and that's just, you write that thing and you go back and you go back and you get that solid and then you move on. But that's just what works for me. Um, because I don't want a second, and I think that helps with the fact that with books, with films, with plays, the worst thing that can happen is, oh, he mentioned the bicycle, so that's going to come back. But if you're doing that, if the writer is doing that, if they're leaving that bicycle there because they know that in 4 scenes that they're going to connect it, the audience is going to know that in 4 scenes they're going to connect it. But the great part is, if the author doesn't even know what that bicycle is doing there yet, then you're not going to know what the bicycle is doing there yet.
Mm, mm. I think people do take for granted the fact that the audience can be extremely intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's wonderful. And I hope a lot of what you just said really sinks into the audience. Feel free to rewind the podcast to listen to that part over again, listeners. What what does being an author mean to you?
We could spend the next several hours talking about that, because that's a
Okay.
great question. It really is a great question, and the only reason I get excited when asked that is because I did it wrong, and
Oh.
it was so I did it when I first did it. I was told, get your book published and it's going to change everything. Your life is going to be different. People are going to treat you differently. When Butchie Birmingham pushed you down in 4th grade in the swing set, he's now going to be sorry. All those people, it's going to have global changes. You're going to be taller. You're going to speak 3 languages. It's going to change everything. And we're told that it's going to change everything. And when it doesn't change everything, we think we failed.
Yes.
Well, we must have done something wrong, because I don't feel any different, and my neighbor doesn't treat me any differently, and my boss still makes me do these stupid things. Doesn't he know that I'm a writer? And it's not meant to be that. I think the big challenge is, if you think about how many people that that would love to be a rock star or a movie star, or you think about the people right now, probably faces are popping in your head. Well, now think about how many people want to be a potter or
Mhm.
a puppeteer or a
Mhm.
leather worker. Well, those are arts too, but you probably can't think of anyone that wants to do those. So there are people that become writers and actors and musicians for the wrong reasons. Anyone who becomes a potter probably really wants to be a potter. So it's not, you need to do it for the right reasons, and to fix something or to become something that you're not. It's not going to do that.
Yeah, I have to admit though that when you said how many people want to become a potter, I instantly thought of all my Harry Potter friends.
Oh, there you
So
go. Well,
I
that's,
thought,
yeah, that's an asterisk.
yeah, that made me, I tried too hard not to laugh out loud there. But what you're talking about, I call it the golden ticket effect. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of new authors go into publishing contracts without having a good grasp of what their future might entail. And of course, we all want to be the next Stephen King or J.K. Rowling or even some other authors that are becoming internationally successful, like Jonas Johansson. But that's actually a little bit more rare. And it doesn't always happen on the first book either. It's rare that will be the next Jodi Picoult or Nicholas Sparks just off of that first book. And that doesn't mean that you're a failure. It just means you might have a little bit more work to do and a little bit more groundwork to get moving on, whether that's your author platform, understanding what in your contract might be holding you back, or different ways to even self market. And I know a lot of people are probably cringing and turning this off right now, but there's a lot that goes into being a modern author, and it can be very challenging. What do you find is the largest challenge for you in the modern landscape?
Well, you just named a few of them. I think it's really interesting to define what is a successful author. I mean, is it just by sales? I mean, Pace University in 1983 did a study to determine how many adults had not read a single book that year, and they came up with 8%. 8% of American adults in 1983 had not read a book. They did that again in 2013, and it was 26% of American adults had not read a novel that year. So that is at a time where there's more books to be read with the self-publishing boom. There's more books to be read than in human history, and
Mm-hmm.
there's less people reading them. There's more people writing them than ever, but
Yes.
there's less people reading them. And I think that adds to what is success. Is success writing something you can be proud of? Is success in making someone think? Or is success in that power? I want to be the Stephen King. I want people to take back what they thought of me. I want people to go, man, we definitely underestimated him. Because if that's success, that's really kind of twisted, but it's very common.
Yes. Yes. It really is, the idea of success. And I was just thinking about the statistics that you were giving because I'm pretty familiar with that study, being an author platform coach. And the last statistics that I saw, it was not a PACE study, but it was a separate study that estimated that after the eighth grade, almost 71% of Americans never read another book. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm going to have to find the citation for that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But then there's also statistics that kind of waver on how many books are published every single day. And it can be an upwards of 4,000 books every single day worldwide.
Right.
So you're going into it swimming a marathon almost immediately. So I think authors might have to challenge their ideas of success. Um,
And you know what's interesting about that is, and I'm not beating up self-publishing at all. I'm just stating something that was very interesting. When my first two books came out in the '90s, this was before self-publishing. So this is traditional publishing. There was no self-publishing around. When it was time to promote locally, the publisher took all the national stuff and I took all the local stuff. When I picked up a phone to contact a bookstore or to contact a reporter, they could not get to me fast enough. This was local news. We have a guy that just published a book. When can you be in the studio? Fast forward 20 years later, doing the same thing, the publisher doing the national stuff and me doing the local stuff, it is begging to
mhm.
get any sort of local coverage because there are so many self-published books out there, and the numbers are, look, if we give you a story, then the 50 people that called me this month are going to want to get it. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm saying it is definitely more difficult to promote than it ever was.
And the other thing that I've noticed lately too is media outlets now want authors to come to them prepared, not just to talk about their book, but with a slew of potential talking points and a media kit. And they want to see that whomever they put onto their show is going to be able to promote their show as well,
Mm-hmm.
return value. And so when a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to work on my platform, or I don't want to do marketing, or I don't want to do branding, in turn, in a way, it does damage their potential because now outlets want that sort of reciprocal back scratch. It's it's intense. It's a very intense situation now.
Yeah, and you look at it from the publisher standpoint, and they are definitely feeling the pinch as well because even the big boys will have two or three authors that pay for everything, and they're very honest about this. You know, they will promote their Stephen King, they will promote those guys keep the lights on, and then we've got these other 300 titles that we're going to put out that are basically just a land grab. If they're successful, great, but we're not putting any promotion into it. I mean, it's not uncommon to get a publishing contract from one of the big five and have them say, "Great, now let us know what you're going to do to promote it."
Yeah. And I don't think that a lot of authors realize that overall publishing is only a 7 to 10% yearly profit for companies. So if a book is $19.99, then you've got Barnes and Noble who takes 60% off of that for their wholesale margin, and then the publisher pays everybody out of that. And on the off chance that they do pull, they pay out of that remaining 40%. So on the off chance that they are lucky enough to pull a profit, it's usually 7%.
Mm-hmm.
And most publishers, like if they do a print run of 10,000 copies, they're already anticipating that 7,000-ish will be returned to them. So it's a baffling business model.
Yeah, it is, and the smaller, the mid-sized ones are even smaller than that. I mean, if a mid-sized publisher can sell 3,000 copies, they're very happy and they're moving on. They're most likely not going to have a second run. You know, they've sold their 3,000, which is what they're, what they budgeted for, and you know, we'll put this in the win column, and we'll move on.
Yeah. This last sort of 15 minutes here was not a single question that I had written down to ask you.
That's
but
funny.
I am
It's funny.
thankful for this conversation. I think it turned into a lot more powerful of a conversation for our listeners than what I had planned on. So I'm really glad that we went down this avenue. I do want to focus on you for the final two questions, though. Was there a time that in your career you wanted to give up, and what kept you going?
Yeah, I mean, every day. I mean, we do this because we do this for either a pure reason or the wrong reason, and I don't think there's anything else. We either do this because we want to get good at it, because we enjoy the craft, because we want to help, because we want control, or we want recognition.
Oh, are you there? I think I lost you.
You can't say, hey, run this through the meter, and what do we got? Hey, you just made a 98%, 98% book. Well, you can't. There's no way to tell. There's really no way to tell, and you can't tell from you get 40 or 50 good Amazon reviews. You have no idea what that means. So you never know. There's no quantifiable proof that you have added any value at all. So, because when you think about it, it's really a silly thing. You're not building a house. You're not feeding a family. You're not teaching, kids to read. You're putting words on a paper, on a, that will be printed out. It's easy to go from either, well, look how amazing I am, to what a silly thing this is. But I think so I ask all the time, is this something that a middle-aged man should be doing? Is this something, this is something you do in high school? Should I be focused more on my family and other things? Or is this a selfish endeavor? And I think as long as you keep asking that question, I think you're okay.
And the one thing that has kept me going every time I've answered that question, as I'm creeping closer and closer to 40, thinking, have I spent too much time? Should I be hopping off this author train? I look at all of the people that have made an impact later in life, and I tell myself, I don't have to be 20 to make it happen. I don't have to be the next 16-year-old wonder kid prodigy author. And there is a time and there is a space for me. And if this is really the passion that sits in my heart, then we're just going to keep moving forward with it. And luckily, every time I interview somebody, they tell me that I sound really young. And so I think I can fool a lot of people into thinking I haven't hit that apex yet. So the final question tends to be one of the most loaded questions, and that is, what advice would you give to authors who resonate with your story and might want to follow in your footsteps?
I think, yeah, that is a loaded question. I think it's the collection of everything that we've been talking about. I think you need to find out what the real. I know many unhappy writers, and I know I go to some of these events, and it's almost like an addiction. They need someone to buy that book so they can feel loved, so they can feel successful, and I think that's such a sad thing to do, and I think it's because there's no way to do it right if you're going that way. The only advice I can do is to just have fun with it and really search your soul for what value you are adding. Telling a story is just telling a story unless there's something in it. Unless one of the greatest reviews that I've ever had was a reviewer that said the best thing you can say about a book is that it changed you. Mm. And I think if you tell a story, it's just a story. I think there's got to be something in there, and if you don't have that, you can't get caught up in what you just said. I mean, you can't get caught up in the fact, well, I've got to get this book out. I told myself I was going to be published before I was 30 or before I was 40. You need to take your time and do it and do it for the right reasons and when it's ready.
When it's ready. This is something that has continually come up with a lot of the authors that we've been so fortunate to speak to, where authors really need to be comfortable in the process of when it's ready, because that is the time that your art and your authenticity is allowed to shine. Audiences are very discerning nowadays, and they can really tell when something is inauthentic or not. Trying to think of what I want to say, but I think not inauthentic is really the best way to put that. Mm-hmm. So if you came to this podcast chat today with Everett, then in the social media posts, whether that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, any of the social media channels, the links to Everett's website and where you can find him are going to be in that social media posting. But just for our listeners who are tuning in today and might not have access to those social media posts, Everett, where can our audience find you if they want to connect and learn more about you or 33 Cecils?
Sure. There's a website, an author website that's everettdemorier.com, and I wish my name was Bill Smith. That would be a lot easier. But everettdemorier.com. Also, there's 543magazine.com. And the best of articles from that are being turned into a book that's coming out in December. And then the publisher site is Blydyn Square Books, BLYDYN Square Books, all one word.
Wonderful. Well, when that next book of articles comes out, we'll have to have you back on.
Absolutely.
Audience. It was so great talking to you today, and I really want to thank you for a truly engaging and insightful conversation and for giving us your time today.
Thank you very much. It was fun.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to have you back on later on our next round of guests to talk some more.
Great.
Okay. Bye, Everett.
Bye. Thank you very much.
We want to thank you for joining us today for the Happy Writing Podcast. And as always, don't forget to head over to happywriting.co and take advantage of that $5 deal just for listening to our podcast. You can join the Author Lounge for $5 for your first 3 months using the code Happy Podcast. If you want to sponsor a future episode, you can also find that information under happywriting.co/podcast. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next author interview.